St. Paul, the Fan.
We're coming.
10:05, 9 to noon, to Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. Here's Gabe Henderson with VEN. What's up, G?
What's up, PA? It's been a while. Good to hear your voice.
Good, man. Likewise, and we'll be seeing a bunch of each other next week in Indianapolis at the National Football League Scouting Combine, which is staying at Indianapolis at least through 2025. And personally speaking, I think that's good news. What about you?
Yeah, just thinking of Indianapolis being such a city when you look at downtown where you can walk anywhere without going outside. I know people say you can do that in Minneapolis with the Skyways, but just how close the proximity is from where the National Convention Center or the Indianapolis Convention Center and Lucas Field Stadium is to the hotels and where all the meetings take place. I don't know if there's many better places that you can put the combine just due to what you get out of it in Indianapolis.
And the combine will have its place in the National Football League, most likely forever. But in starting to arrange the radio shows for next Tuesday and Wednesday, I've just come across so many people, from Leslie Frazier to Matt LaFleur, Todd Downing with the New York Jets. I've come across a myriad of coaches, that I'm used to seeing and or recording interviews with there who just are not going. And it's like large portions of staffs are not going certain days when they do the sneaky hotel room 20-minute interview to try to get some intel. Well, there are a lot of these rookies who are refusing the cognitive test, so that eliminates part of it from what I understand. But what do you think? What do you think of the fact that either teams are just sending a few personnel people or basically not going?
Yeah, it's a touchy subject, right? Because you say, well, if you're a new coach or if you're a team that wants to build in a certain position, I need to see everyone in person, and I need to make sure that I can feel their energy and I guess evaluate on things that basically doesn't show up in the stat sheet or I don't get post-combine. At the same time, you see guys like Sean McVay or the Andy Reids of the world or the Bill Belichick's of the world. They don't show up to the combine, and you look at their resume and they're winning Super Bowls. So it's a double-edged sword. Like you have to weigh it out. I think personally, from my perspective, that when you look at just the energy that is felt in person versus over a video call or versus, what we're doing right now, calling down the line, it's just a little bit different. Granted, these coaches will get to see these guys at pro days, but when you want to go through a full step-by-step evaluation from, okay, I met this guy at the end of February and I'm drafting him at the end of April, I believe, in my opinion, that the combine does factor into some of those decisions. So I know every team operates differently, but at the same time, I understand it from both perspectives.
Is this the place last year, or is this the time last year at Gabe Henderson via Twitter or X? Indianapolis, is that where you started or fell in love with Jordan Addison?
I fell in love with Jordan Addison back in 2022, I believe. I was watching, I believe that was the year he won the Biletnikoff Award, and I just remember watching him at Pitt, and I was like, dude, he is single-handedly getting Kenny Pickett all of this praise. Like, Kenny Pickett, the quarterback at Pitt that year, was in the Heisman conversation, and I was like, yeah, Kenny is a really good quarterback, smart, but Jordan Addison is bailing him out of so many plays. So ever since then, I think it was the Clemson game that year where he had the 2 touchdowns, the toe drag swag in the end zone. I was like, we got to watch this guy, and just building on from 2022, and then last year when we had the opportunity when the draft in 19 and there was no receiver taken off the board, and I believe the Chargers selected. I can't think of his name right now. The receiver from TCU with the 21st overall selection.
Yeah,
Quentin Johnston. And then the Ravens selected Zay Flowers. I was like, oh my gosh, like this guy who was the best receiver in college football, in my opinion, the past 2 years is still on the board. Mm-hmm. I can't see Kevin O'Connell not drafting this guy. And now look, Jordan Addison, 10 touchdowns last year, over 900 receiving yards. So I'm so excited that guy's in purple.
But you're playing coy. Okay, because you and this if it was born of inside information, great. You still got to the winner's circle. You still got to the finish line first, and you were in the winner's circle getting your picture taken, and everybody was cashing bets. All right, so really at the end of the equation, that's what matters. Because I mean, you were imploring. Well, not imploring, but you were low key establishing 9 to noon on Wednesdays that Jordan Addison is the right guy for the Minnesota Vikings to pick. So now we're at US Bank Stadium. Where were we? The Delta Club? I think it was the Delta Club doing the Ballyhoo draft show.
Yep.
Well, you're sitting back there, writing stuff down, doing Vikings.com stuff and Vikings Entertainment Network stuff. And you're still pushing like Lieber, Bursic, and myself, just that, you think it's going to be Jordan Addison.
Yep.
And we didn't. And it's not that we didn't take you seriously. It's just sometimes pride will get in the way of so much. We were just so married to our own stupid opinions. And the answer was right in front of us in the shape of you. So are you in love with things yet, or do we have to wait?
Oh, when it comes to Jordan Addison?
No, when it comes to this year.
Yeah, I have a few guys that I'm looking at that I'm like, dude, this could be, if this guy falls to us, we could, ultimately, be a better team. And I believe, Pete Bursic, him and I, we probably text every other day, just literally sending each other guys that we've watched on film either 5 minutes prior or just breaking down certain guys. So, people that really know me know that, every year around, February, the first week of February, I start my 150 NFL draft prospect list, and I watch film on every single one.
You got 150?
Yeah, I'm up to 150 at this point. So I write down every guy, write down my notes, watch the film, and then ultimately, if we draft a guy, I have some feedback based off of the prior research that I've done. So Pete and I. He's a guy I really lean on for stuff like that. And
we will get into some of those names, as many as we possibly can, around the corner with Gabe Henderson from the Vikings Entertainment Network. 9 to noon, yours truly and Pete Bursic, along with Gabe Henderson, Tatum Everett, Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, hopefully Brian Flores, and so on. Doing a couple of radio shows next week at the Combine in Indianapolis on KFAN. Gabe will be a big part.
Stay connected to the Fan.
So who are you loving this year? I mean, we don't need to drop all the names now. I mean, certainly we don't have time for 150. Right. But I know you're way down the road on the rookie film study. You just talked about the coveted 150. I mean, where shall we begin? You want to begin with quarterbacks? What do you want to do?
I mean, quarterback is. I think that's the most talked about position. So I believe everybody's opinion is warranted when it comes there. I want to kind of go a little bit deeper in the weeds. You always say that I'm playing fast. I'm going to play fast here. A guy, Cedric Gray, linebacker, University of North Carolina. I know people that are listening saying, well, you're from North Carolina. You're a diehard Tar Heel fan. This is a very objective opinion. When you look at his film, he is just one of the elite athletes when it comes to explosion, running sideline to sideline, pretty much can do it all linebacker. And I believe he's a late day 2, early day 3 guy that honestly could make some noise whatever team he plays for. I know, defense right now when it comes to Brian Flores and just the coaches that we have on our roster, I just look at just their coaching abilities, and I think Brian Flores wants guys that are kind of raw and that he can teach them the technique. I believe what makes Brian Flores such a great coach is the fact that he pays attention to technique. A lot of guys, when they get to the NFL, they're just, put into a system and they're just told to go play right away. And a lot of coaches, don't really emphasize technique simply because it's a do or die business. And I believe that's something that separates Brian Flores, and Cedric Gray, I believe, could be very valuable. Also, a guy in Chris Jenkins, a defensive tackle from the University of Michigan, national champion last year, a guy that put on 20 pounds prior to his senior season last year, just a raw athlete. Those are just two guys that I got my eyes on right now as far as just young, underrated sleepers that could pretty much make an impact on any roster they join next year in 2024.
Tell us more about Jenkins, and are there a bevy of players from that Wolverines defense heading to the National Football League?
Yeah, Chris Jenkins, I'll start off with him. He's a guy that gained 50 pounds since entering the University of Michigan. He's a guy he's a nephew of 9-year veteran defensive tackle Colin Jenkins. He's a son of 3-time All-Pro Chris Jenkins. So he comes from a lineage of defensive linemen that have already made made their name known in the NFL. So when it comes to just knowledge of the game and understanding the history of how offensive linemen like to block them, I believe Chris Jenkins is ahead of the pack there. So on top of that, I mean, you know, Michigan, just one of the best defenses in all of football last year. They have a bevy of guys. I mean, Junior Colson, who I think could be a early day 3 guy, a linebacker from University of Michigan, 6'3", 245 pounds. Those 2 guys, in my opinion, were the staples of the front 7, or the starting defensive line and the starting linebackers for that University of Michigan group. And we know those guys, were top 10 in the NFL and top 10 in the NCAA last year in interceptions. So there are DBs up and down that Michigan roster last year. I believe that will make some noise in the draft this year. So Junior Colson, Chris Jenkins, those are 2 guys, I believe, from that Michigan defense that I think their game will translate pretty well to the next level.
Now, your longtime friend slash family friend, Jordan Reed from down North Carolina way, he and I have been texting a little bit, and he will definitely stop by the KFAN Vikings Entertainment Network tables to join somewhere Tuesday or Wednesday, but you definitely will be around. Yep. And it's I texted him not only to set that up, but when I saw a tweet that he had within the last 3 or 4 days, and Jordan with ESPN, he's tweeting up a storm involving a lot of these players where he's watching film, or he's been to the Combine, the Senior Bowl, the East West, or the Shrine, whatever it is. And he's formulating his opinions, and he wrote about one of the very first guys that caught my eye, named Jerzon Newton. He's the defensive lineman from Illinois. Yep. And he's a 3 technique with a bunch of tackles for loss. And I couldn't pick out Jerzon Newton in a 2-person lineup standing next to Brad Childress.
I always love that one.
About 7 months ago. But then all of a sudden, I'm watching Illinois play the Gophers. And they kept talking about this Jerzon Newton, suspended for the first half. Jerzon Newton, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know who he was. Well, he came in the second half and just wrecked the entire game. So then now all of a sudden I'm learning about him and following him after that. I'm in love with the guy, man. I'm not a big mock guy because it influences my opinion too much as to where people think people should be drafted. I just like to read the intel on their, what's presented with what they've done. So I don't know if Newton, if he's 11-ish, if he's second, I have no idea. I just know this Jerzon Newton, man, he's going to make somebody incredibly happy if you do any work on him.
Yeah, I've watched a little bit of film of him. I believe Pro Football Focus had him as a mid-first rounder. When you turn on the film, he's a guy that's just physical. Like you feel his presence whenever you turn on the film. And 6'3", almost 300 pounds. He's a guy at that size that has every move when it comes to dipping and ripping, bull rushing a center back into the quarterback. Like the guy can pretty much do it all. Like he's a good gap defensive lineman. So when you look at just a nose tackle in the NFL, you're assigned 2 gaps, either left or right, and the guy, he can pretty much do any move to get around the center in either of those gaps. So to your point, to Jay Reed's point, I think he will make a lot of noise in the NFL. Just a solid guy. I think his teammates call him Johnny Newton. So I'm interested to see if he will go by Jerzon when he gets to the Combine or go by Johnny. But either or, that guy's going to be making some money in the NFL soon.
Gabe, do you how imperative throughout the draft, maybe free agency, do you believe it is to bolster Mr. Flores' defense with defensive linemen? And so I'm like, cast your gaze and put your mind the way of a 3-4. All right. And I know it changes. And I know that specifically Flores, man, we had 7 strewn across the line of scrimmage many, many times, which kind of nullifies specific positions. But nevertheless, if you're in a 3-4 and you got two defensive ends, you got a defensive tackle, it's getting pass rush from one of those three, specifically defensive ends. That's I think of utmost need. What about you?
Yeah, I do think pass rush is probably top 2 or top 3 priorities for the Vikings this year. You can say that about any team, but just understanding that, Jonathan Bullard isn't under contract anymore. I believe there's only 3 guys right now that the Vikings have under contract. I may be wrong there, but I know it's less than 5 when it comes to that defensive line unit that's coming back next year, or at least that's on the roster currently. So I do think bolstering that defensive line and getting some young guys to go alongside Jaquelin Roy, who the Vikings drafted last year, could pay big dividends for this Brian Flores defense. We know Brian Flores likes to throw blitzes left and right. We led the NFL in blitzes last year. So I think when it comes to interior defensive line, you just want guys that have a really good anchor and don't get pushed back. If guys can literally hold up another offensive lineman, that ultimately opens up lanes for these Brian Flores Vikings defensive linebackers and outside linebackers to be able to rush the quarterback. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. We know what Ivan Pace can do now, under a year, undrafted free agent last year. We want to see him be able to run free. So when it comes to these interior defensive linemen, just hold up the other offensive line guys, so these Vikings linebackers can run free to the quarterback.
Hey, Gabe, whether you mention Cedric Gray or Chris Jenkins, this isn't necessarily pick 11 specific. These are guys that you've done some research on. When you see how the Vikings are putting their research together, Munnins and Jamal Stevenson and everybody included, and specifically to the defensive line. So take quarterbacks, everything else out of it, D-line in a vacuum. I'm curious what your philosophy is, and unless they tell us, we're not going to know what the team's philosophy is. Mm-hmm. The idea in the case of a Danielle Hunter, if Danielle Hunter is no longer on the team when it's draft day, we have to draft an edge rusher. Do you think that's part of the philosophy? Because of Jerzon Newton, if it's just about getting pass rush, and you see that this kid who definitely plays a different spot, but he produces that thrust in the middle, do you lean towards, well, we just want the best player available? Jerzon Newton, in our opinion, we think he is, so we're going to take him. Or because Danielle Hunter's gone, are you just plugging spots? Is it just D lineman out the window? This guy's an edge rusher, so we must take that Jared Verse cat from Florida State, or Dallas Turner, I think, another outside pass rusher from Alabama. Do you play that kind of game, or are you really just truly focused, okay, the goal is pass rush. That can come from multiple areas, so it's not necessarily about plugging one specific hole in the dam as it is accomplishing a more broad goal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think once you get to the draft, you want to go best player available. So that's why I'm interested to see how the Vikings attack free agency. Is that bringing Danielle Hunter back? Is that going after a guy that's available, maybe like a Bradley Chubb, or who knows? I believe the Vikings will try to address that position in free agency, but how does that affect the draft when you got a guy, Brian Flores, that likes to blitz a lot? Danielle Hunter last year, 16 and a half sacks. I believe, only 6 or 7 of those sacks came on third down. So I'm interested to see how the Vikings value a pass rusher when you like to blitz as much as you do. Is that, putting the defensive tackle position, the nose tackle position as a priority over edge rusher? It's so interesting under Brian Flores because we don't know. Like, if this was another coach, I could give you like a definite yes. At 11, the Vikings should go to edge rusher. But when you blitz so much, you don't really need the elite top of the line pass rushers in the NFL. That's when you start putting your money towards your cornerbacks, because you think you have fast and physical and versatile enough guys to get to the quarterback that your cornerback can make a play on the ball. So it's going to be interesting. I think how the Vikings attack free agency will give me a better idea of how they'll attack the draft. But if you look at any of Kwesi's drafts so far, he's tried to go best player available, and he's done so by being aggressive or at least signing key guys in free agency. I'm just looking at Zadarius Smith 2 years ago. Marcus Davenport last year, we were hoping that he could play, a few more snaps or a few more games, but they have done a really good job of addressing that pass rush position in free agency the past couple of years. So it'll be interesting.
So when you're at the combine, teams now it's and you guys mentioned it last set, like certain teams aren't going. So, interviews via Zoom and those sorts of things. Team getting out of the combine, chance to see workout. What are you getting out of the combine? Is it the search to validate what your own eyes saw on film at this stage, or reporting with the team? So, you're following the things that Kwesi's going to be talking about, that Kevin O'Connell's going to be talking about. But from specific to the players, what are you getting out of the combine or hoping to get out of the combine when you're there next week?
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing how these guys test. Personally, I'm not the biggest advocate of, if a guy performs well at the combine, he's going to be this, big time NFL athlete. Just playing college ball, I don't really view the combine as big as, a lot of other people do. But I think at the same time, when you hear some of the coaching philosophies or some of the general manager philosophies on how they want to build, I believe that's where I get my most insight, because now once they start talking about kind of how they want to build inside out or outside in or cornerback or starting with a receiver, then you can start honing in on some of the priorities that, these teams are starting to look at, in the draft or free agency. So I am more so looking forward to seeing how Kwesi and Kevin handle the media and handle, just certain things that come their way with certain meetings versus, how a guy runs a 40 or how a guy runs a shuttle. That matters. Yeah. But I think, how it all marries together is something that I'll be, having my eyes on primarily.
Help me with Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy. What do you see?
A guy that's very accurate, a guy that hasn't played many snaps in college football, but when he has, he's been very successful. 25-1 as a starter at Michigan, but Michigan was a run-heavy team. When it comes to that run-heavy team, is that something that the Vikings, mesh with when it comes to trying to find, marry the run versus the pass versus the run? But I don't know. He's a guy that very good arm talent. That's very evident. He can be inconsistent sometimes with ball placement, but he can make every throw. But if you look at the month of November for J.J. McCarthy, he only had one passing touchdown in that entire month. So it's how do you weigh that with a guy that you want to come in and, is he going to be the franchise quarterback, or is that the Vikings plan for the 11th overall pick? And if that's J.J. McCarthy, I believe that comes with a lot of question marks, because he just hasn't played enough football or thrown the ball enough, in my opinion, that I could say, okay, this is the guy.
Caleb Williams and Drake May, it's widely believed, in 2023, they're coming off seasons into the draft that were not as good as their previous seasons, 2022, specifically Drake May. Do you see it that way? And it's not like it's going to impact how things go. I mean, I'd bet Williams first, but, I wouldn't bet a lot. We're still, several weeks, if not months from the draft. But nevertheless, 2023 for those quarterbacks compared to 2022, was it a precipitous drop off?
I mean, statistically, yes. Trophy-wise, yes. I believe leadership, no. I believe when you win all those awards in 2022 and come back in 23, there's a lot more pressure on you. And the fact that those guys, in my opinion, I believe kind of lived up to the pressure. I mean, Drake May had a 91. He had the second best passing grade in college football last year. Caleb Williams didn't have the best opportunities to be able to throw the ball. I mean, granted, he's a guy that makes plays out the pocket, but these still are two dynamic quarterbacks, in my opinion, that will be drafted in the top 5 if that's how it goes. And I don't know. We don't know what teams are going to trade up, but 1 and 2, those two guys are my 1 and 2. You can probably put Jaden Daniels up there also, but yeah, Caleb Williams, Drake May, even though they didn't have the greatest season statistically that they had in 2022, I believe they're still good enough to go in the top 5.
Do you believe Daniels? Do you believe the LSU quarterback has to go to a certain team to succeed? What I'm getting at here is if you run, truly a system, okay? But I just wish I'm looking for a better qualifier. But like this team, the Niners, the Rams, just the attack the middle zone. Quarterback has to have a swivel, a successful offensive scheme. Now the Ravens undoubtedly run a scheme, but they know the quarterback eventually is going to break the pocket. So then the scheme goes in the rearview mirror to a certain extent. Likewise for Philadelphia with Jaden Hurts, where a lot of their deep stuff is actually predicated on confusion, where he gets outside of the pocket. You think it's willy-nilly, but they know exactly what they're doing. The highest of high ends would be Mahomes, where, yes, there is a scheme that there's an offense they put in, but he's going to improvise. So therefore you have to know what to do off the improvisation. So the point being here is if Daniels, of all the three, Daniels, May, Williams, does it matter most which team Daniels goes to determine his success?
Yes and no. I do believe he does have to fit into the right scheme for his playmaking ability. But I just think Jaden Daniels just has the it factor. Like, he's a guy that can, make every throw, but at the same time, like, he's just a winner. Like, the guy just knows how to put the ball, when the ball is in his hands, he can make a play. And I believe that's something that a lot of these quarterbacks in this draft don't have. There are probably more accurate quarterbacks or faster quarterbacks, but when it comes to just the all-around package, I believe Jaden Daniels has that. And that's just my opinion, just from watching the film and just seeing, the level of competition he played, what he did against that competition, and kind of the outcome of his, last 2 years in college football. And that was the first thing when I was watching this film that I said, there are certain things that stand out. It's like, okay, well, can he do this or can he do that? But when he can pull the ball down and make plays with his feet, that's the it factor. So it'll be interesting to see what team, kind of fits his play style, or, what scheme fits his play style.
If Jaden Daniels is almost, you could consider him a wild card at the QB spot, emerges from some obscurity, changes schools, does his thing at LSU this last season. Marvin Harrison Jr., not a wild card by any means, but it's been interesting following the trajectory and the arc of conversation as it surrounds him, where, whether in, playing into mock drafts and such, the idea that a New England could select a Marvin Harrison Jr. before maybe addressing what many believe is a problem at quarterback. And we here in Minnesota, it's like, we want to keep JJ. If Kirk goes away, the value of JJ could be diluted because you're not getting what you need from the guy throwing him the ball. All of that. But in terms of the prospect that is Marvin Harrison Jr., is this a top 3, a top 5 true talent where he can instantly walk into whoever takes him and be that number one guy?
Yes, I believe Marvin Harrison Jr. has every skill set needed to be a guy that can wear a gold jacket one day. That's just my opinion. Just when you turn on the film, he can run every route. He's fast enough to get by any defensive back. He could block, and then put on top of that, he's 6'4", 6'5". So that's the catch right there. Because if you think you can outrun him, then he has that length and size that he can moss you. So I hate putting him and comparing him to his dad, but that's the obvious storyline right there, right? Marvin Harrison Sr., just one of the greatest receivers of all time, playing with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and I'm interested to see what that looks like. I mean, it's either you draft, if you're drafting in the top 3 or top 5, do you have the quarterback that can throw the ball to Marvin Harrison? I believe that's the number one question, because I believe he's that good that you can't pass him up if he falls to you.
Isn't it amazing, too? Marvin Harrison Jr. So Marvin Harrison Sr., like, he's Hall of Fame. Marvin Harrison Jr. has 5 inches and 15 pounds. Where did he get that from?
Wow.
I got to see Mrs. Harrison to understand how the 6-foot, 175-pound Marvin Harrison Sr., something's in the gene pool there, obviously.
Anybody have a working cell phone number for Reggie Wayne?
So far what you've done, 150 players, 50 players, all the research that you've done, and I'm sure you're still, what a hobby. You got the baby at home. We got film sessions. Like, that's elite dad life right there. The deepest position, not talking about quarterbacks, but what do you think at this stage where you're feeling like, okay, D-line or it's at corner, some guys that jumped up at the Senior Bowl have a chance to do so at the Combine and such. Have you started to whittle out or put into your brain like, man, this class at this particular position is going to be something not only where you can find elite high-enders, but maybe find some depth as we enter day 2 and beyond of the NFL draft?
Yeah, I know PA says that 2020 NFL wide receiver draft was the greatest wide receiver draft class in the history of the NFL. I personally think this upcoming year's draft class could rival that class. I mean, you got 10 or 11 guys that could be drafted in the top 40 or top 50. I mean, Jalen Polk is right now the wide receiver from Washington that came out after his sophomore year that just lit it up this year. He's the 10th or 11th best receiver in this draft class. Like that's saying a lot. Of course, to your point about Marvin Harrison or Jaden Daniels, there has to be a right scheme for a lot of these guys to be able to excel to their, best potential. But still, I think this wide receiver class is very deep. The interior defensive line class also, in my opinion, is very deep. So I'm interested to see what that looks like. I mean, you can go down the line of, the Mason Smiths of the world from LSU. Justin, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, from Alabama. He's 6'5", 290. There are a handful of defensive linemen that could go in the top 2 or 3 days. I mean, top 2 days, in my opinion, also. But it's all going to come down to these combine, to these pro days, and then the final couple of weeks until the draft before we can actually have a better idea of what this looks like. I believe for those two positions, pro days are going to play a huge dividend to how those guys get drafted.
Is it when you get to Indianapolis, do you enjoy the Covenant catch-up portion of the equation? I mean, you're outside of TCOPC. I'm away from here. You got JW Marriott or wherever we stay, the convention center, with like a lot of people you've met through doing statistical work for the Vikings radio network. So the play-by-play guys and analysts and stuff like that. Just chatting with a bunch of people about free agency and the draft, whether you used to work with them in Washington or you knew them from the Liberty days or whatever. How much do you enjoy that, and what do you pull out of it?
Yeah, that's in my opinion, that's probably the best part about the Combine, is just seeing all these people that you've worked with along, over the years, and just seeing how their careers evolved, and just some of the stories that you get to share that you don't get to share any other time of the year because you don't get to see them, and everybody's kind of in their own respective, work. So that's probably the highlight. Outside of that, PA, I enjoy talking to you and Bert. This is Burster's first time at the Combine in 12 or 14 years.
Yeah, so I think so.
It'll be interesting just to, just see his take on certain things and just catch up with him. So I'm excited for all of the above. I know this is, they call it the underwear Olympics, and you talk to, all these guys and, all these guys, doing all these measurements and testings. But at the same time, for us, it's just a great way to kind of get on the same page of everyone and just be able to just share stories that you may not have heard during the regular season. So I'm excited. This is one of my favorite events of the year.
I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you later, okay?
Thanks, PA. Thanks, Nordo.
Thank you.
Gabe Henderson, Vikings Entertainment Network, at Gabe A. Henderson via Twitter. Chris Finch, coach of the Wolves, about 20 minutes from
PA on the Fan.
News to Nord brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park, CanterburyPark.com. Poker, blackjack, table games all year round. Bingo on Tuesdays. And then live racing in the springtime here. So looking forward to that, CanterburyPark.com.
And we have ski joring this weekend at Canterbury Park. It is Saturday and Sunday. You can learn more at CanterburyPark.com. Sixth season for ski joring, which is horses pulling those on skis, and they race around the track.
Oh, that's sweet.
So it's very entertaining, something very good for the kids if you're interested. There also is a popular freestyle show featuring prominently skiers and snowboarders pulled by the horse. They launch off a 15-foot snow ramp across a 20-foot gap, performing tricks and flips, cowgirls, cowboys, and weekenders, thrill seekers, everybody invited. CanterburyPark.com, ski joring, and also dog racing, I believe, this weekend.
I'm going to have to watch Ben-Hur in the chariot race to prepare myself for ski joring.
Always.
Things get weird out there, but it's always a blast at Canterbury Park. The Wild are on the chill tonight, PA.
Yep.
But we are scoreboard watching, of course. For the rest of our lives, we will be. They're 2 points out of a playoff spot. We're rooting for the Islanders to win in St. Louis. And then we're rooting for Nashville to get beat by the Kings in L.A. So paying attention to other teams as the Wild remain in Canada. They're in Edmonton tomorrow night. Yeah. It'll be a 7:45 p.m. Fallness Festival / pregame. And then
good luck with that one.
Puck drop shortly after 8 p.m.
Yeah, I was for when I called those Wild games a couple of years ago, I signed up for the NHL Center Ice package, and obviously I've forgotten to cancel it because every time I think about a game and then I go to find it, it's there. Well, that happened last night with Edmonton and Boston, 9:00 start, and I fell asleep about 10. But, I mean, it was a low-scoring start to that thing. It ended up like 6-5 Boston in overtime. I mean, I haven't followed. I know the Edmonton Oilers are good. I know Boston's been struggling a little bit as of late. I mean, you watch some games, and then you watch those two teams play racehorse hockey. It's otherworldly.
Yeah.
With watching like the high-enders for those teams, man. Edmonton, I know they took the OTL last night. Holy cow, is that squad good?
Well, Edmonton is, if you're watching them, and you'll see them on Friday, Edmonton's an example of why the climb is so tough in the NHL, because they went through a stretch where they won 16 or 17 in a row, and they were in the basement, and they hop, skipped, and jumped over all sorts of teams in the Western Conference standings. But they are now still like 13 or 14 points south of Vancouver, who was in town. Like, they won 17 in a row. They've been as hot as anybody in the NHL for 2 months.
Yeah.
And they are still fighting their way into maintaining a playoff spot. And things are starting to separate, and they're definitely a playoff team. But the climb that the Wild are enduring right now and will continue to endure, whether it's getting a couple of points tomorrow night against Edmonton, tough one, or the next night with Seattle, people keep referencing this advantageous schedule down the stretch. Get that money, honey, as many nights in a row as you can, and you're still on the grind to be playing in the playoffs.
Well, it's, excuse me for not knowing this, but when we put 10 up on Vancouver, all right, I had no idea Vancouver had the amount of points it had. And was ranked where it was ranked.
Oh, that was my vibe on Monday. I'm doing the show at the radio studio at the X, and just like, well, hold on here. They were trying to sell the team away after they did dirty on Boudreau a year ago, and Taka comes in, and Boudreau's just waiting for the clock to run out.
Yeah.
Brock Besser to Minnesota rumors, his agents actually trying to effort that to happen. And now this next season, Tocchet, Mike Yeo, the assistant, they have the most points in the NHL. Elias Pettersson's out of his mind. Besser's got 30 goals already. Where the hell did this come from?
Right.
I had no clue on Monday into that game.
I had no idea until, and honestly, I didn't really have, because the Tuesday show from KOA, I'm crafting it with 10 goals, then we got the box, and then we got other things to talk about. So I didn't really look into, like how good Vancouver allegedly is. Well, they played the Avalanche the next night at Ball Arena. So, then I'm chilling, sitting around in the afternoon in the hotel, like looking at NHL.com, and I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
Because how's for when speculating is legal here, this is just what people do.
Someday.
How do teams generally respond when they give up that many goals? So just doing some research and stuff like that. And I just came across how many great things Vancouver had done this year.
Yeah.
And they lost to Colorado 2 nights ago, Tuesday night.
Yeah, they're on a 3-loss stretch right now.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe we need to know more. It's hockey. 8 seeds can win the Stanley Cup. See
Funny
the LA
game.
Kings. I ain't tripping over the Vancouver Canucks.
No.
I'm tripping over McDavid. I'm tripping over McKinnon. That's about it. Okay, Dallas. I'm tripping. Is DeBoer still their coach? Assumedly, with DeBoer still their coach. I'm tripping over them until we show in a playoff series that we don't, with all due respect, get clowned by somebody.
Yeah.
They went to clowning the Minnesota Wild last year.
Well, I think so. I'm with you. I'm not tripping over Vancouver or Winnipeg. I mean, just, you want to talk about coming back to earth after that game on Monday.
Then
you go to Winnipeg.
Vegas.
But yeah, so I'm not tripping over them because now during the season, the Wild have not matched up well with some of these teams. And there have been injury. You lose 2 in a row to Winnipeg into, I think, just before New Year's. Then you lose the way you did the other night. All of that. The Wild don't match up very well with Dallas in particular. Yeah. Winnipeg, you can talk about that. Vegas, you win in the 702.
Right.
That's different than a 7-game series with the 702. All of that. It's just because it's been flip PA from the idea of we're tired of one and dones. We're not going to stand for it no more. To now we're just begging for a one and done. Now we're just begging for the team to be in the playoffs to have a chance to match up poorly, well, or otherwise with any of those teams. But Vancouver, very impressive. The problem with that 2-game stretch, though, you're like, hey, you scored 13 goals in a 2-game stretch, Wild fans. That's pretty sweet. You gave up 13 goals in a 2-game stretch. So that's kind of an issue. So goaltending, all of that. Hopefully, whether it's Gus Bus or Fleury tomorrow night, that one of them bounces back. To the Gophers, our 11:35 a.m. guest, Al Nolan. He's going to be in studio. He'll be side by side at the barn tonight with Grimmer. 6:30 pregame, 7 p.m. tip-off. Gophers hosting the Ohio State Buckeyes in men's hoops. Gophers are 7-7 in the conference. They get 6 games remaining. I think at least half of those are at the barn. So we dig that. They're 3.5-point favorites over the Buckeyes this evening. Weird thing with the Big Ten, and we'll get into it more with Al Nolan. He knows more than we do. Buckeyes, talented team. They're 5-10 in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So they've had myriad struggles. However, they're just coming off of a win over somebody that the Gophers couldn't beat, the Purdue Boilermakers. So
wow.
You're seeing, Indiana's been kind of up and down and middling. You're seeing some really good programs that are just it's just a massive bloodbath in the middle, it feels like, with the Big Ten. The bell curve is very narrow, very few on the ends, not so much terrible, not so much great, but a lot of teams battling it out. It's going to be a super fun game. Excited to hear from Al at 11:35.
Looking forward to it. The Rutgers game, something I listened to on the free iHeartRadio app, seemed like a very energetic Williams Arena, specifically when they pulled away and opened by like 10 or 15. Then Rutgers made a little bit of a run. So hopefully fans are attending the games and genuinely appreciating their team.
Last thing for you, I heard this audio from Adrian Peterson. We're familiar with Adrian. We're familiar with his greatness on the field as a member of the Minnesota Vikings. Apparently, a real estate company is going to, they were holding, I guess, effectively an estate sale. And here are some cool things that Adrian owns you might want to buy. Well, Adrian's pissed off because he didn't give them the okay to start giving people the opportunity to bid on like his personal trophies and stuff. And, he's a little upset about it.
I want to clarify recent rumors and media reports. An estate sale company without my authorization included some of my trophies in the sale, despite clear instructions to leave personal items untouched. I did not authorize the sale of any of my trophies, and I will be taking legal action. Trusting this company without supervision was my mistake. We allowed them to go into several of our storage units with clear instructions. They clearly did something unlawful. I want to emphasize that I am financially stable. It would never sell off my hard-earned trophies. And if I was going to sell them, I know people that I can sell them to. I wouldn't go online and sell my personal items randomly. So let that sink in.
So yesterday I saw this. I even texted you, and my first inclination was something that you would have seen on social media as well, is if this is happening, that means there's some serious financial problems. And he says he's financially stable, but maybe he is, maybe, there's different broad spectrum of that. But then there were the merch maniacs who were like, who wants to help me bid on all the trophies? So it was, oh no, he's going through financial problems on the other end. I wonder if he's got any game warrants from the 09 season.
If you listen back to that, you'll hear him reading a statement or something that was written.
It was written.
For the first, well, the last part wasn't.
No.
The last, well, that's the real part.
Yeah.
All right. From the end of I am financially stable. Financially stable is subjective.
Yes.
So that was the end of it, and then he started being real.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I know people. If anybody want to buy these trophies, I know plenty of people who would buy them. So yeah, just God bless Adrian, and hopefully everything's well with him.
That's all I got.
Chris Finch, coach of the Wolves, around the corner on KFAN.